and welcome to the Meeple Mentor YouTube channel. Today we're doing a review of Farshore, or Everdell Farshore is the full title. I'm Jared, and with me is Holly. So we just got an early copy of Farshore, which we did an unboxing for on the channel, and got a chance to play it, 3 players, and it plays very similar to base game Everdell. If you're unfamiliar with the game, it plays with cards. You, on your turn, have workers that you can place on different action spaces to gain resources or draw cards. And if on your turn, instead of placing a worker, you may also instead play a card by spending those resources. Either cards from your hand can be played, or one of the 8 cards in the bay, which is comparable to Everdell, where you've got the meadow, which is 8 cards in the meadow. One of the differences, though, with the meadow or with the bay and the meadow is in this game, if a card comes out that's a duplicate of a card already in that bay, it will stack on top of the existing one and you draw a new one, so that you'll always have 8 different cards to choose from. That's a nice change that I guess you could probably just implement in original Everdell and, see more variety of cards that way faster.
Maybe.
But there's a few other changes as well.
Don't you get to the end of the deck and then end Everdell? Doesn't that?
No, I feel like if you were to ever get through the cards in Everdell, you would still reshuffle them. Okay. Yeah. So there are a number of changes to the game in Farshore, but it is an extension of the Everdell universe, hence it's still got Everdell in the main title of the game. This one takes place more along the coastline and has to deal with more aquatic creatures and birds and, crabs and things like that.
Whales.
What are your initial thoughts on the game?
I like it. It's just different enough from Everdell that I would want to play it again. Mm-hmm. I think in the succession of Everdell with expansions, Everdell, and My Little Everdell, this may be in the middle of those as far as playtime and probably complexity as well. There are a few tweaks to the rules that make it stand out, which I like. They're very interesting differences. One of the key things that stood out to me was not being able to inhabit as many animals on constructions as I would have wanted to. You can only do 3. So that was interesting.
Yeah, they limit you to 3 free critters played in the game on in your own town. So you start with 3 anchor tokens, and those can be used on any construction one time. And instead of having a named critter that matches a particular construction, this is much more flexible. It'll just say, if you put an anchor on a construction in your town, you may play any critter that matches that card type into play for free. So like a green production construction card, well, then you can play a green production critter card, for free. So they just do that. So there's some more flexibility in having to, get through the deck and try to find the exact right construction card needed for a critter to be played free. I think the idea with that was to try to reduce, how much is dependent on the card draws. And so, but instead they limited you to doing like 3 critters in the game for free. So whether it's a good change or, if someone who wants to really maximize everything and potentially in Everdell get like 5 free critters played, I think 3 is fine. From our experience, it gives you a little bit of strategy and direction to say, okay, is this worth me using one of my 3 anchors on, or should I keep it for a later, critter that I want to get played?
Right.
So I think it's a great change. I like the new component as well. It's not just like a wooden circular disc. It's a metal anchor. And the other thing it does on the cards is it leaves more room for the artwork, since there's less to have to write in the corners, the names of different cards.
Right. It's not that I dislike it. I just,
it's different.
And plus, that is another thing. I'm not a huge fan of the design of the lighthouse itself. Simply because I used all 3 of my anchors not knowing that I had another worker coming to me that I had another season to go because I didn't see my worker on the board as available. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out how I had already gone through the 4 seasons.
Right. What had happened was the lighthouse had gotten bumped, and her piece, fell behind the lighthouse, and so no one ever put it back on top, and so she never saw her last piece or her last worker to be able to know that she still has one more season to go into and another worker to pick up. I will say that the lighthouse is not quite as functional gameplay wise as the tree was, because there's not as enough surface area on the platforms for the lighthouse. Plus, in this game you gain 1 new worker every season, whereas in Everdell you get 1, and then 2 in the final season. That's a lot of extra guys. This one you only get 1, and 1. So the 6th critter is just occupying your ship, which is another new game mechanic. So in all, you're using less workers. And the lighthouse, there's only 2 platforms, and the platforms are only big enough to hold 1 of each player's critters. So that 3rd free critter that you're supposed to get in the final season
just has no place for it.
There's not a place for them. So the game says, well, you can either place them like on the lighthouse somewhere or at the top of the game board. From our first plays experience, I would say don't even worry about putting them on the lighthouse. Just put them at the tops of the board where they designate the different seasons, because otherwise you're going to kind of forget, which season you're in, because there's not an easy visual distinction on the lighthouse like there is with, the tree in Everdell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the lighthouse looks fine. Like it's just not as useful.
It's just not as space friendly as
I feel like the platform needed to be a little bit bigger, or they should have added a 3rd platform so that you can more easily keep, all 3 of your extra workers there instead of just 2 of them on the lighthouse.
But you mentioned the ship, and I actually do like the ship feature. I think that's really cool. It gives me some Maracaibo vibes.
Yeah.
I like the idea, and I was able to maximize my prosperity cards to where having passed, so you'll pass little treasures that you can pick up on the way, and they're worth 2 points each or a wild resource.
Mm-hmm.
I had a prosperity card that allowed me to get a point or 2 points for every treasure I had passed, which if I didn't use them for wilds, and that ended up netting me 3 points apiece. So it was really nice.
Yeah. So that is a new game mechanism that tries to encourage some direction every season on what kinds of cards that you want to try to get played. Every season there's an A and a B token in the Winds of Change. It'll tell you in the A section, for instance, like common or unique or critter or construction. And then in the B, it'll tell you one of the different kinds of card types. So if you see, like the blue governance card type and critter, for that season, every card that anyone plays that's a critter or blue construction or blue icon or both, you get an advancement with your ship on the outer track. And as you advance, the ship is going to be worth points based on where they end up at the end of the game. And as she mentioned, at certain checkpoints along the way, you land on or pass treasure token icons and you gain a treasure. So it's a nice way to advance and get some extra free resources and points, because the treasure tokens are a nice new addition that you can spend them as a resource for anything that you need it to be, or keep it until the end of the game, and every treasure token is worth 2 points.
I think a nice balance of using and hoarding the treasure tokens and moving my ship was what got me like in the middle.
Yeah.
As far as points goes. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a pretty decent strategy to use for it.
New cards that directly just move your ship, since that's a important game mechanism. Like some of the traveler cards, you play it one time and it'll say move your ship 3 times.
You also have locations that you can put in your city, the little red paw location where you can put your worker and move your ship 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
there's
beneficial.
Extra, types of focuses on getting you more advancements on the ship, which not only is points, but can help you get an extra free resource and, via treasure. I liked that, I like the focus of those, and at the end of every season, those two A and B winds of change tokens change,
Mm-hmm.
but it only changes until, or it waits until the last player has changed season. So whoever's the last to move into spring, then they move those tokens down to the bottom and reveal the next ones, and then so on for every season. So they stay out for quite a bit until the last person's done.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I enjoy it.
I think it's great.
I think it's a great game. I think it's different enough from Everdell and My Little Everdell that you can do it as part of the collection because it's a lot of fun. We had a good time.
Yeah, the artwork's still really great. The characters and the animals are often very cute, and how they're, wearing clothes or doing their various, jobs and things like that, as is normal with the Everdell, game series. So it's definitely on par with, what you're used to seeing and expect to see from a game like this. The gameplay, if you've played Everdell, you're going to be right at home here and probably appreciate those Winds of Change tokens that allow you to move your ship forward as sort of just a bonus thing to say, oh, well, should I play this card or this card? Well, if I play this one in this season, it's going to help, get me some advancements on my ship, which could be worth the points and maybe worth a free token. So I do like that direction. It does play faster than basic Everdell. I think one of the reasons for that is you have one less worker.
Yeah.
There's less cards, and you can more streamline, your free plays of critters because it's not tied to specific constructions, specific critters. So I think it just generally plays faster. So you would actually recommend this if you have Everdell, that you would recommend Farshore?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
just to add to the collection, in that it's, like he said, it's shorter. We played it our first time with someone who had never even played Everdell, and he really enjoyed it. So it could be a good, like almost, well, maybe a medium weight.
Yeah, I'd say
for
it's a
group. It's not quite as intense as Everdell, but it still does make you think. It's not as short as My Little Everdell, so you get that nice. I really like the medium of it. It's a very in between.
So there's also the new worker locations that come out. Like in Everdell, you've got those cards that fill up the forest. In this, you've got island tokens that get randomized, and it's one of 7 or 8 that can come out. And you get a number of island tokens based on player count. But the key thing in the difference in this game versus how those extra force locations work in Everdell is after the second season, the last player to move seasons gets to remove 2 of those island tokens, removing locations from the game, and thereby, again, streamlining where you can go, what you have to do. I think that's an interesting mechanism to be able to choose which of the 3 or 4 islands are going to stay, in play for the rest of the game. And when it happened, our third player, he was like, no, those 2 are gone forever. I'm like, yeah, they're gone. I just got rid of them. They're gone. He's like,
he was great. He was a lot of fun.
He was very animated, but it was devastating for him because he's like, no, I really needed those spots, and now where am I going to get such and such? And so you got to find new ways to do it. So that's new, that's different, and there's also the scrolls. So it's instead of having in Everdell monuments or card events to go for, this one has just a capture all space where you go to claim one of the scrolls. And there's 6 kinds. They're based on how many of different kinds of icons you have in your town. So if you have like 2 prosperity cards or 4 green cards, that sort of thing, then you qualify to take that corresponding scroll. There's a stack of scrolls in those kinds that decrease in point value. So the first person to claim the scroll will have a more valuable, point scroll. But for instance, if you gain a scroll, it'll say like 2 points per scroll token that you've collected in the game, which means that there are other scrolls that are 0 points per scroll token, but the token itself will help boost the point score of another scroll. So they're still worth, something if you can at least boost it with a different scroll that, lets you score. That's a new mechanic that I think is it's well done. And once you start seeing people collect the scrolls, you go, ooh, I'm missing out now.
I was just thinking about that, but I was actually surprised at how close I got to you in points when you had like 4 scrolls?
Yeah.
And I had 1.
Yeah. It's true. I had 4 scrolls that scored. I even had a prosperity critter that scored extra points for scrolls. And she had only 1 scroll, and yet we were within...
like 7 points apart?
Within 10, I mean, for sure. Like, so that's a really good, kind of example of how close scoring can be when taking different paths to victory, if you will. Like how she maxed out more on the kinds of cards played that have more value and more points.
Yes, that's what I did.
Whereas some of mine were like 1s and 0s or 2s, and maybe hers were 3s, 4s, and more. And so I think that's cool, because when you're talking worker placement games, you're always about limited options and where can you go and what are,
what can you maximize with what's available.
Right. So I think it does it really well. And as a medium weight game, this is great. And we played it with someone who's not familiar with modern gaming, but he caught on, quick enough to really appreciate what was going on and how to, how to play. I think this would be a great, maybe first or second level entry point into worker placement for someone. Not only because of the simplicity of, kind of what you're trying to do. It's much quicker than Everdell. And, the artwork and that sort of stuff is attention grabbing, and it just is unique, and it kind of, brings people who aren't even into the hobby wanting to play this and dive in. And I think it's a pretty good addition to the Everdell collection. That being said, I'm going to differ from Holly on this and say if you have Everdell, you probably don't want to get Farshore.
Really?
I'm going to say that because Everdell, I think, does a lot of these mechanics better, and it's more tight gameplay, more tightly strategic, and that's just sort of my preference on that kind of gameplay. But if you have Everdell, you're going to feel like this is like Everdell Light, and unless
that's why I like it.
Unless you prefer a game that you can play faster or play with newer players without having to explain a whole lot of extra stuff, Everdell does these gameplay mechanisms better from a gamer perspective. If you don't have Everdell and you're thinking of going one way or the other, Farshore would be my recommendation if you're either newer into gaming, not sure if you want to jump into Everdell that has 5 expansions and whether or not you're going to get them or not, if you feel like you're getting less of a game, yada yada. Farshore might be the pick for you if you like shorter experiences, but you want the full Everdell experience that's more tightly contained. And certainly if you like the aquatic theme better, go with Farshore. Unless you're a super fan of Everdell and you want to have the complete collection, I would say pick one or the other. Me personally, I would probably stick with Everdell because I like all the expansions that come with that game. And I can tell just from playing Farshore, they're going to probably make quite a few expansions to this as well. So I think eventually they're going to be roughly the same. And as far as like how much content, how much complexity is added.
That's eventually.
But that's eventually. That's just, I'm anticipating that. So for now, I would say I prefer Everdell, but this has a place. It's just a hard call if your money's tight and you want to choose between them, or if you have Everdell and it's worth getting Farshore. Probably worth keeping Everdell and maybe just mixing some of the new rule mechanics in with Everdell and see how those feel. That, house rule Everdell a little bit to get the experience of the new additions to Farshore. That's just my thoughts. It's a great game. I really liked it. It's just really hard to decide, is it worth having along with Everdell? And that's where I think we have a disagreement. I don't know. My thoughts could change, but that's where I stand right now. So, leave us your thoughts in the comment if you've played, or if you've played both this and Everdell, which one you like better, or if you do recommend owning both, let us know. Certainly it's going to be in our collection for those moments where we're introducing this kind of game to new players and want a short experience. It's there. But any final thoughts? Cool. Well, this has been a Meeple Mentor review of Farshore. I've been Jared.
I'm Holly.
We'll see you next time. Bye.